Hello, and welcome to Informs' webinar, March Madness Analytics, where we will be discussing the data science of the NCAA tournament and how the same principles of analytics can be applied to policymaking. My name is Jeff Cohen. I'm the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at Informs, the largest association for the data and decision sciences. Informs members support organizations and governments at all levels as they work to transform data into information and information into insights that lead to better decision-making and more impactful results. Informs' 11,000 members are comprised of diverse and robust experts in data science, analytics, operations research, and other related fields. Their work literally touches every sector and has been responsible for saving lives, saving money, and solving problems across a broad spectrum of areas, including healthcare, transportation, artificial intelligence, and so much more. Today's webinar about the NCAA Tournament Analytics comes on the heels of Selection Sunday, and as people all around the country are creating their brackets through a wide variety of tools, techniques, and let's face it, the occasional coin flip and a wish. But there's a better way, and we are very excited to have Dr. Sheldon Jacobson from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign as our guest. Dr. Jacobson is perhaps the preeminent expert around the data science behind bracketology. Importantly, Dr. Jacobson's expertise with analytics and operations research also extends to a wide range of public policy challenges, including transportation security. In fact, Dr. Jacobson's work is widely considered to be the driving force behind the creation of the TSA PreCheck system, in addition to many other important contributions. Aside from this webinar to help you fill out your bracket, we also hope it provides a better understanding of operations research and analytics and the many ways policymakers can incorporate these approaches to save lives, save money, and solve problems. With that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jacobson. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. We appreciate the opportunity to join you all today. I know that there's a tremendous number of sports fans who are here and involved in putting together brackets and just having fun over the next few days. So now that we know who all the teams are, the question is, how are we going to determine who will be the national champion? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our work in bracket analytics and show you how the kinds of tools in data science, operations research can be used to help people, in fact, put together their brackets. Just a few facts to note that in 2022, over 36 million brackets were filled out and over $3 billion was wagered, a tremendous number. At the same time, when people are thinking about the tournament, they're not necessarily at their desk working. And as a result, over $6 billion of lost productivity results from that. And this ranks third in office distraction, only behind texting and Facebook, things that we, in fact, all do. So a little bit of the numbers. The population of the United States is a little over 330 million people. The national debt is skyrocketing. We're getting up there, as you can see, in the trillions of dollars, over $31 trillion. The number of mega million combinations, a number we think is being quite large to, in fact, get the right one, is a little over 302 million. But the number of possible 64-team brackets is over 9 quintillion. So when you put these numbers in perspective, you realize how such a daunting task it is to get that perfect bracket. Back in 2014, Warren Buffett had a challenge to saying, if you can give me a perfect bracket, I will give you $1 billion to his employees. And it turns out that sounds like a very risky proposition, but it wasn't, because it's just so hard to put together the perfect bracket. Even when you take into account performance of the teams and likelihood of teams winning, you still have around 8 billion combinations. So it's highly unlikely that any of us are going to end up with a perfect bracket. So if you don't get a perfect bracket, don't feel bad. You're just like everybody else in this particular case. So I'm going to give you some tips, which are based on the data and the analytics that we've looked at. And you can find all of this on our website, which is bracketodds.cs.illinois.edu. But it gives you a little bit of an idea of how these trends have persisted over the years in the tournament and how you can use them to guide, in fact, putting together your bracket. The first thought is upsets, especially in the round of 64. In the first round, seeds 16, 15, 14, and 13, they do win, as you can see there, they do win occasionally, and typically you'll see one or two of them advancing out of the round of 64 to the round of 32. But if you picking them is so difficult that the best thing that you can do is don't pick any of them, or pick one of them at most, and you can choose one however you want. I wouldn't suggest you choose a 16 beating a 1. It's only happened once, which was when the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, defeated Virginia. But Virginia got revenge the following year. They won the national championship, so maybe it wasn't such a bad thing. So if you're going to pick one, maybe pick a 13 or a 14, but no more than one. Another thing is the 10s, 11, and 12s. We talk about the 12-5 upset, but if you look at the performance of the 10s, 11s, and 12s, they're remarkably similar, and it does occur quite a bit of the time. As a result of that, maybe picking one or two of them is reasonable. What about the 8-9 game? Well, the 9 is actually favored over an 8 based on historical data, but it really is a coin flip. So I suggest you flip a coin to see who's going to be your 8-9 upset. Tip number 2 is the Sweet 16 always has a few surprises. Half the teams typically are going to come from seeds 1, 2, or 3. Around 28% are going to come from 4 to 6, 13% are going to come from 7 to 12, and 10% of them are going to come from 11 to 16. So you can see the number you would expect, but you don't want to necessarily overdo it. Still lean heavily on the 1s to 3s and a little light on the 11 to 16th, but having a 1, 11, or a 12 seems to pay off. But if you can get it right, that's always the challenge. Same thing with 7 to 10s. Maybe picking one of them is a reasonable thing to do. Once again, we're trying to optimize our brackets. And as a result, picking those rare upsets, even though they do occur, is very, very difficult. The lead 8 is when things really get interesting, and that's when the highest seeds, the number 1s and the number 2s, are most vulnerable. In fact, the number 1 seed has a record in the Elite 8 of 60 and 41, only 60%. Number 2s, in fact, don't even play 500. They're 32 and 35. Same thing with number 3. They're 17 and 20, and number 4s are 13 and 9. They do quite well. And if you look at the head-to-head matches with 1 to 2, 2s do a little better. The number 1s have a 23 and 24 record, slightly below flipping a coin, while 1s do better against 3s, which are 16 and 10. So this gives you a rough idea that Elite 8 is when the real upsets start to appear. Now, the biggest question that we all have is putting together our brackets is, where do you start? And the natural inclination is start in the round of 64, go to the round of 32, go to the Sweet 16, and all of our analytics says that doesn't work. What you want to do is pick your final 4 teams first. And if we look historically, since 1985, 60 of them have been number 1 seeds, 32 have been number 2 seeds, 17 have been number 3 seeds, 13 have been number 4 seeds, 7 have been number 5, and the rest of them, which are only 19, have been something else. So as you can see here, 1s and 2s in the final 4 are good, but you don't want to put too many number 1s, as we see. So, but by doing this, once you've picked a final 4 team, let's suppose you decide that you're going to have Alabama as one of your number 1 seeds in the final 4. Well, what do you do from there? Then it locks in all the games it took to get to the final 4, because you have to win 4 games. You do that over 4 teams, and voila, you've locked in 16 of the 63 games. This effectively reduces some of the uncertainty in picking your bracket. So pick your final 4 teams first. And we see this here, that what's equivalent to that is picking your Elite 8 first, because if you pick those 8 teams in the Elite 8, you're then locking in, once again, 16 games. So in essence, what this tells us is that if you start in the round of 64 or 32, you're creating far too much uncertainty in putting your bracket together. This is all based on analytical modeling that we've done to help people put their brackets together. The next thing you do is you pick your national champion. You have your final 4. What about your national champion? Well, the number one seeds have done a really good job in that regard. 24 of the 35 national champion teams, in fact, have been number ones. And if we go through, we see twos, threes, but then four above, only four of them have reached that level. So as a result, you want to stick with a number one if you want to play it safe. If you want to be a bit of a flyer, maybe pick a 2 or 3. But going beyond that, it really is a long shot. So the key is, by doing that, you've now locked in 18 of the 63 games. The next is you pick your national runner-up. Once again, we look historically, 13 of them have been number ones, 8 have been number twos, 7 have been number threes, and 9 have been 4 or lower. How you want to choose them based on your final 4 is on these numbers. But once you've done that, you've now locked in 19 of your 63 games. And those are the games that also weight the heaviest in the ESPN Challenge. Final 4 seed combinations. Well, once again, everybody says those ones have to win. But historically, if you look, picking 4 number 1 seeds is the least likely probabilistically, while in fact it's much less than picking all of the number 1s not to be in the final 4. The optimal number is typically 1 or 2. We've seen 1 number 1 seed occur, in fact, 16 times and 2 occurring 14 times. So as a result, this gives you a rough idea that that's really where you want to be, having 1 or 2 number 1s in the final 4. And even final 4 seed combinations, if we look at having 1 or more teams seeded 10 or worse, has actually occurred 6 times, while the number of teams which are seeded 11 or worse have occurred 4 times. And our models give you probabilities of their frequencies. They're rare, but they're not overly rare. And we often see 11s or 12s being in that group. What about no team seeded 1, 2, or 3? Well, it's never happened. As a result of that, you don't want to have that. At least having 1, 2, or 3 seed is important. What about no team seeded 1 or 2? It turns out that did happen once, but it's expected to occur only around once every 30 years. And what about only teams seeded 1, 2, and 3, those top 12 teams? That's actually happened 11 times. It's quite frequent. So you can see why putting heavy weight on those top 12 teams is so important. So what's the point of all this? Well, the very same analytical tools that we use to build brackets are also the same tools that we've used in our own research lab to improve aviation security operations and, in fact, inform the design of TSA PreCheck. It's also improved the delivery of healthcare. It's also been used in our research group to design fair congressional districts and maps. And this is what operations research does. It's building models to inform decisions in complex systems. My own research has been forming, like I said, the foundation of TSA PreCheck. As Jeff has noted, it was funded by the National Science Foundation. We've also looked at issues surrounding mass murders and assessing trends to help law enforcement better deal with this, as well as the general population. We've also established links between public transportation and obesity to combat the epidemic of obesity. And then we've also looked at computational redistricting in our own research, also funded through the National Science Foundation. You can visit my website, shj.cs.illinois.edu, to get more information on some of this research. So let's get back to March Madness, because that's why you're all here. Is seed patterns do dominate team ratings. The best surrogate for how a team's going to perform is their seeds. And if we look at the patterns, it gives us a tremendous amount of information. Analytics in March Madness is the real deal. It does work. It has worked. And you can go to our website, bracketodds.cs.illinois.edu, and see some of the brackets that we generated over the last few tournaments. Using our bracket simulator for the men's and women's tournament is also a way that if you don't want to get into the analytics, just let our simulator, in fact, figure out what brackets you want. And we have multiple simulators based on the different rules, like the Final Four model or the Elite Eight model, and you can use those. And we found a little tip, they work best. So we encourage you to use some of those. I want to thank the Institute for Operations Research and the Management Sciences for having me with you today, as well as giving you the opportunity to visit our website, Bracket Odds. Thousands of people use it and are using it as we speak, and we hope that you will find something useful there that will help you and encourage you to have a great tournament. So I want to thank everybody for joining me today.
Dr. Jacobson, thank you very much. We've done an event like this for a number of years, and it's always fascinating. It's always a great reminder, and I'm perpetually chasing my perfect bracket. Nevertheless, let's get into a couple of questions. First is, and one I've never actually asked you before, how did you first get involved in doing NCAA tournament analytics?
Well, I grew up in Canada, and my favorite sport was hockey. But when I came to the United States to go to graduate school at Cornell, I started to attend basketball games, got into it, and then eventually when I became a faculty member, I realized that the analytics in sports, and in particular college basketball, was tremendous. And using my data science expertise to help inform some of these decisions was just a natural segue to what we're doing today in developing bracket odds. So this is how I got into it.
Oh, that's great. So you may have touched on some of these in your presentation, but I think they're worth kind of reinforcing for our viewers today. So you've been obviously analyzing tournaments for many years. How would you describe the biggest mistake that people make when they're filling out their brackets?
Biggest mistake that people make is putting in far too many upsets in the early rounds, because although we do see 12s beating 5s and a 13 and a 14 occasionally winning in the first round, they usually don't hang around that long. Yet once you've made that upset, it percolates through your bracket. So as a result, looking at the data, once again, the top 12 seeds persist, and they're most likely to be in the Final Four. Once again, you have a few teams outside of it. At the end of the day, the 1s, 2s, and 3s win national championships. So people tend to overestimate the performance of the underdogs. At the same time, if you underestimate it, even though your bracket isn't particularly exciting, it tends to score better.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. So, you mentioned some of the non-basketball analytics work that you've done, but I'm wondering if you can elaborate that on that a little bit for us in terms of the other data science work that you and your students have done, and sort of the impact that it's having. What should our viewers know about that relationship between the basketball analytics and this other important policy work?
We live in a very data-rich world, and because of that, we need tools, analytical tools, to make sense of the data. After September 11th, when everybody was beginning to be treated the same way as a potential terrorist and threat to the air system, it became obvious that we couldn't do that because it was too expensive, and it really wasn't a good use of resources, and it wasn't in the interest of the passenger. Most passengers were very benign and safe. As a result, we started to look at mathematical models, these analytical models informed by data, to help people understand that a differential screening model would work. We called it multi-level passenger pre-screening. It eventually became known as risk-based security, and eventually led to what we know today as TSA PreCheck. So our work really informed the design of TSA PreCheck. So when you, as a traveler, get on an airplane, and if you are PreCheck qualified, then the work began using data analytics as the kind that we do in Informs.
Before COVID, you and I spent quite a bit of time together on Capitol Hill, talking with House and Senate committees and staff, and we did so virtually over the last couple of years. But as we head into Congress being opened up, our members being able to travel much more readily to Capitol Hill these days, what kind of advice would you have for our viewers on how policymakers can better leverage data science and how they can tap into the expertise of professionals like yourself as they're thinking about legislative approaches to some of the biggest policy challenges we're facing today?
One of the challenges is removing yourself from the ideology and allowing the data to speak. I write a tremendous number of op-eds and essays which appear in The Hill, for example, the Chicago Tribune, many other publications, and I always base it on what the data says using the analytic tools that we have available to us. And sometimes the conclusions we come up with are very counterintuitive. But once again, it's not the ideology that demonstrates or dictates what we say, it's the data. And we encourage people to look at the data through a lens that is informative, and the kinds of tools that we have in operations research and data science really speaks very loudly and sheds light. It doesn't always give a final conclusive decision, but it certainly informs the discussion. And this is what we try to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point of how it informs the discussion and how it provides hopefully an unbiased approach for folks on both sides of the aisle to think about how we legislate and regulate in order to accomplish our goals as a society and for the economy.
Sure.
One last question, back to the tournament. And again, you sort of spoke to this at the beginning of your presentation, but millions and millions of brackets are filled out. The perfect bracket is almost unheard of. Why is that? And how can our folks watching today close that gap?
Well, no one's going to get a perfect bracket. It's very rare, 9 quintillion to 1, but even if you take into account the performance of the teams and the seeds, it's still around 8 billion to 1. So what you want to hope for is a reasonable bracket. And if you're in a bracket pool and you're competing among your friends, 20 of them, you don't want to have the same bracket. Incorporate some diversity into your bracket or set of brackets, and you may discover that you'll perform better. Once again, it's just entertainment. It's a lot of fun. It brings people together. And that's why March Madness is so great, because it's as much of a social event as a sports event. And it's just a lot of fun for a lot of people to learn how analytics and data can inform our decisions.
Absolutely. Dr. Jacobson, thank you again for your time today and for your many contributions, both to bracketology and to the world around us. And similar to Dr. Jacobson, Informs has many members in virtually every sector of policy that can be helpful in identifying problems and thinking through solutions with your office. And if you think we can be helpful, please reach out to me at jcohen@informs.org. I would be happy to connect you with the right person or people in our membership that are the leading experts in the areas that you're interested in, and they'll be able to help you bring a data-focused approach to your issue. And we look forward to continuing working with our partners in Congress and beyond in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Thank you, Dr. Jacobson. Thank you to our viewers, and best of luck to everybody during the tournament.
Thank you.